and we can do a 3,000 square foot house in 20 to 25 minutes,
Wow.
start to finish, set up, tear down everything. That's a $400 to $500 job. So the economics they're just incredible.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Kerner Office. Today is my first interview. So I'm obsessed with both franchisees and franchisors and how that whole business kind of works. And I'm also obsessed with pressure washing. I think it's a cool business. And so I talked to my friend Aaron Harper. He's the CEO and founder of a franchising company called Rolling Suds. And they have a couple hundred plus territories. They just launched like a year or two ago. They're growing like crazy. And I thought this was an interesting conversation because you get to learn how $100+ million business is run. He's not quite there yet, but he's getting there really fast. And B, you get to learn how a $500,000 business is run. So you get the best of both worlds because most people run $500,000 businesses and not $500 million businesses. I'm interested in both. And so I got to hear about the pressure washing business from both a franchisee's perspective and a franchisor's perspective. We broke down some numbers, talked about his origin story, and I think you'll like it. So let me know what you think. And we get into the conversation talking about how he got started in franchising. So enjoy.
And so I called a buddy of mine that I went to college with, and he was like, you should get into franchise development. And I was like, what's franchise development? Because like many of the people who were watching this, listening to it, I thought that franchising was just McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. And I had heard horror stories about like Quiznos and Subway and stuff like that. But he opened my eyes to like this whole home service realm where you can buy into a service company. And I loved the idea of helping people become business owners. And so emailed his boss every 3 weeks for 6 months until he hired me. That worked at the largest carpet cleaning company in the world, helped grow that.
You were selling territories for them?
Yep. And what was wild, man, is I would sell a territory or sell franchisee, buy 2-3 territories or whatever. And I would call him a couple weeks after and just see how his ramp up processes are going. And he'd be like, no one's contacted me yet. And I think I'm supposed to train in 2 weeks.
Holy cow. And he just dropped $50,000 per territory?
$60,000, $70,000, $80,000 on like startup expenses. So I would push back, obviously, on the network and be like, what the heck? And they'd be like, oh, blah, 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 or whatever. And it was brutal. Then eventually this organization was like, yeah, if you don't get in line, you're not going to rise up in this company. You need to make right with the other. Because I care about franchisees. These people, right. I take it very seriously. They're giving us.
You have to develop a relationship to sell something for $60,000, right? And then you're kicking them to the curb, or at least your boss is.
Yeah, and it was, I think, and this is one of the challenges that I just see in franchising is like we had our sales arm and then operations, and then there was like marketing, and no one was talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go in to be like, hey, anyways. So it just drove me crazy. I still believed in the model of franchising, and there were still people who did well despite it all, and they had support that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And that company was then purchased by a private equity-backed restoration company that does a couple billion a year. And they wanted to deploy capital and build a portfolio of brands. And so they bought the company I was working for cash, said this isn't a buy and flip type situation. We're buying and holding for. And so I was encouraged by that. They bought a brand in the drywall repair space. They bought it from a founder who exited immediately. There were 100 locations sold, 40 franchisees. Mm-hmm. And I was the first full-time employee on the business that after the acquisition. I was like, I'm not putting anyone in this system. We don't have a system. We got to fix it. We got to figure out.
It was ugly.
It's needed. Yeah, like it was. Think about it. If you've got 100 locations and they all need to get profitable and you have no employees. So we hired a brand president, and him and I.
What did he sell for? The drywall company.
At least, I don't know exactly, but at least a few million.
Dang. So this owner was just slanging territories.
Just
and
slanging.
Then people would fly to him every month or so, and he would just do this training and say, good luck, call me if you need anything.
So he had no experience in franchising. He had a cool idea, which was drywall holes in walls need to be repaired. And there's not a niche company that does that. So had a great idea, was a phenomenal salesperson, and he would fly to them and train them. And then yeah, like no
You
support really
fly to
after that.
them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so there were some franchisees who were doing well, but they were doing well because they persevered, and that's who they are, and they would have done well at anything they
Yeah.
did. So I think a big piece of being a franchisor is being a listener. So before we started selling territories, we hired a brand president, and him and I went on a listening tour and asked everyone what they needed from us. What did they think they were going to get that they didn't get? Where is their business today? Where do they want it to be in 5 years? What do they need from us in order to help them get there? And really just let them know that like we're there to support them, and that's why we bought the company. And we built systems around everything the franchisees needed. We reverse engineered it. We put our first franchisee on the road. This was all happening in COVID, by the way. It was 2020. And the franchisee was cash flowing his first month after training. We turned leads on for him at training. He had a full-time skilled laborer hired prior to going to training that we helped him recruit. And he did just under $30,000 his first month in business with a 30%
Wow.
EBIT.
Just
So
patching drywall holes.
literally.
And really, he wasn't even doing the work. He was growing the business, but his skilled laborer was doing everything.
Correct, which is, I think, the right way to do things.
Yeah.
Just in general, a lot of franchisors are like, no, you go do the drywall repair. And my thought process, I think franchising should help people build assets and
Not jobs.
and if you're the worker bee doing it, like you're the job. It's hard
Yeah.
to build the business when you're the one doing the job. So I felt we were prepared to grow that company at that point. We built a business not from scratch, from negative scratch. You know what I mean? Like it was a culture.
You'd have been better off from scratch.
100%. 100%. So anyway, I then grew that company in 2 years by 223 locations across the country. 3 franchisees who bought 223 territories. We became the biggest drywall repair company in the world. And all those franchisees opened with jobs on the calendar and an employee hired prior to going to training.
Wow. That's awesome.
Thank you. Took a village. We put teams in place. There were some things that I definitely would have changed had I been in control of the operations. I was running the kind of development side of things, but within the confines of what we were given, I think we did a really good job.
What were the unit economics of that business from the franchisor's perspective? What were your territory fees? Did you give discounts for multiple territories? What were your royalties?
So the territories were, I think, 29.5. But they financed
all of them?
The territory. I think 50%, if I'm remembering correctly. It was like 50 or 60% would be financed. So like we could get someone in for 3 territories with 45 grand out of pocket, and then the rest would be financed. There's really no inventory or equipment even for that business. There are some like sales businesses where it's a painting business or something like that, and you just have a truck and you go sell. It was pretty similar in terms of you only bought the mud and the putty. It wasn't like high inventory. So it was good. It was a good business. It wasn't like you're going to build a multi-million-dollar enterprise business, but like someone leaving a corporate America job where he's making 120 grand a year and like wanting to get up to that like relatively quickly, like we were able to accomplish that.
Yeah. What does an average repair or a patch cost? And then what do the margins look like on that?
Yeah. So it was either a half day or a full day job.
Okay.
Half day was about 400. If it was a full day, it'd be about 800. So you basically be able to make about $800 per technician per day.
Wow.
The average job size when I left was like 442, and that's 4 hours of work. So not bad. You're operating at about a 30% margin after franchise fees on that business.
Wow. So even if your kid puts a hole in the door with the doorknob, that's a half day job minimum.
Yeah, there was a minimum. So there'd be a minimum, and then they'd go out there and see that there's cracks in the ceiling, or see that there's, is there anything else? Because we have a minimum. Is there anything else that you wanted?
There's always more stuff.
They'd have stuff behind paintings that their spouses did. So like it would get up higher. But yeah.
That's smart. I like that model. And so you had a proven like a marketing system. You knew that you could generate leads, paid ads or whatever. They're buying into the hand holding, the support, the system. And you just say, hey, follow this playbook and you'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. And we were doing that all across the country. When I left, we were signing up a new franchisee, and then we were training a new group of franchisees and putting 7 franchisees on the road every 7 to 8 weeks.
Wow.
And so we had it humming, and we became the biggest drywall repair company in the world. And other companies tried to follow along, and there's now 6 or 7 patch franchises that have tried to ride the wave.
Mm.
So to finish your question, the company I was working for, we had grown them to 12 brands. So
Okay.
4,700 locations, 12 different brands in 55 countries. And so we became the second largest portfolio of service brands in the world. And they came to me and they're like, Aaron, love what you did. We want to put you on like track for a higher level role within the company. We're going to buy a business at the end of the year. It's not a franchise yet. We want you to franchise it. We'll double your salary. We'll give you a really fancy title. And I was like, wait a minute, I can do this on my own. I could build a team. I could raise capital. I could find a business that I believe in, and I could franchise that business.
Real quick, when you say do it on your own, do you mean buy a business and make it franchisable, or start a business from scratch and make it franchisable?
So so there's 2 separate businesses when you franchise. There's the franchise business, and then there's the actual core business. Those are 2 separate businesses. My plan was to start a franchisor based upon a good business. So I didn't want to go acquire a restoration company, and now I'm a restoration professional trying to run a restoration company. I wanted to say, hey, I've tweeted about this, but you have a good restoration business, or in my case, you have a good power washing business. I want you to keep running your business because it's a good business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to create this other business, which is the franchise business, and you're going to have upside in that business. I'll take all the risk. I'll raise all the capital. I'll build the team, and you get to keep doing what you've done forever. And so that's the way I did it.
And so they keep doing what they're doing, which I imagine that enables you to get a better price, but then they do get an upside in the franchisor side of the business as well.
Yeah. So the way I structured the deal is I didn't pay anything to them for the bit. Like, I'm acquiring the systems, the franchise rights, the trademarks, but the business that doesn't have any real value necessarily until we have franchisees. So they get to keep 100% of their business, the systems and the right. So I raised capital for that. I invested. They actually also invested, the founders of Rolling Suds. I raised a significant amount of capital so that I could build the system the right way, and also put people on my cap table that I could always bring more capital in just from the people who are already there if I needed it. And I knew exactly when we'd be profitable as an organization. I knew exactly how much money it was going to cost to get us there, because I modeled out 5-6 years of what a franchisor looks like at a certain royalty rate, all that kind of stuff. And so I finalized the acquisition in January of last year, in 2023. We took the brand to market end of February. And then I now have 28 employees. I have turned away 59 people who wanted to become franchisees, had the capital, and weren't right for our system, which is a little over $10 million in revenue that we've turned down.
Wow.
And then we have signed up now 51 franchisees who have purchased 187 territories in 26 states. We've done that in 15 months. And on the personal side, I live in Nashville. My wife and I have been married almost 5 years. We have a 3-year-old son, and my daughter is 18 months. So if you didn't think I was nuts after everything I just told you, how pregnant my wife was all this time.
2019 to 2021, that was a crazy time period for you then.
Yeah, 2022. Oh, 2019 to 2020. So
even to 2022. I guess it's just been a crazy 5 years for you.
It's been nuts. Yeah, that's a great way. Yeah, exactly. It's been nuts.
It's cool to see the effects of compounding, right? Like you were just, all of the 2010s, you were just grinding, compounding, slanging territories. And then 2019, you just saw an opening. And then here you are, 187 territories. So 3 to 4 territories per franchisee.
Yep. We do a minimum of 2 because we're not looking for single unit operators. It's just a different mindset in my experience. And I should clarify that everything that I'm saying about franchising is from the lens of my experience.
Yeah.
And my experience is different than a lot of other people's. And in my experience, single unit franchisees fail more frequently. They have a different mindset. They're like, let me stick one toe in and see
side hustle.
Yeah,
Be
and I'm
great
just
if
like,
I could
that's
make
not my
80 grand
buyer.
a year. Yeah.
And that's just that's not our buyer. Our buyer is the entrepreneurship through acquisition. I want to build a multi-million dollar enterprise buyer. That's our buyer. So we do a minimum of two. And then the maximum for most people is three territories to start. However, we've brought in folks who have had 9-figure exits. We brought in like the largest fast signs franchisee that does 42 million a year. Like we brought in some larger operators who they don't want to take any dollars out of the business for like years or a decade until they have 12, 15 trucks on the road. So we've allowed those types of buyers to buy more 4 or 5-ish territories, 6 maybe.
Yeah. Because you got to find that happy medium between someone that wants to scale and someone that's not just going to get crushed by scale.
Correct. Which that's hard to figure out. I've just done it long enough to where I have a pretty good intuition. And I did all of those. I think this is important for anyone who's like listening and maybe does or doesn't understand franchising. Like I did all the franchise sales myself up
Yeah.
until about 5 weeks ago. So
Oh,
all
wow.
51 of those franchisees, I single-handedly walked through the process and made sure that the right expectations were aligned of like what our responsibilities are, what their responsibilities are. And that was really important to lay the groundwork because candidly, a lot of the franchisees that have signed up are similar in terms of like mindset and goals to me,
Yeah.
which is slightly crazy as entrepreneurs are.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, when I hire people, I tend to hire people that are like me, you know,
Yeah.
and that's my tribe and that's normal. That's human nature. Diversity is good. But as you grow, like you need, like in those early stages, you need people that are like you so you can grow. And then you get to a point where it's like, all right, now you have to specialize in either that person's going to work in a specialized role because he's been doing everything, or sometimes people just don't scale with the business.
Yeah. And that happens. I say a company that's growing like this, if you've got employees that are just like plateauing, they're holding the company back. And a fast growing company outgrows people. And
Yeah.
there's no way around that.
How much did you have to raise to get the franchisor off the ground?
So I'll tell you what so a good franchisor needs, in my opinion, at minimum $500,000 and realistically closer to $1 million to $2 million to
Wow.
actually properly franchise a business. And I should provide some additional clarity. I'm able to be profitable from franchise fees because we do the franchise sales in-house. I raised enough capital to where if we didn't sell franchises for X period of time, we'd be fine. But I've been profitable since April of last year. We've been able to take the capital that franchisees give us and reinvest it into infrastructure. A lot of franchisors might outsource their franchise sales to franchise sales organizations, or and in those cases, they could potentially be losing money on franchise sales because they pay the whole franchise fee
Mm-hmm.
out to the sales organization. So that would then mean they need $2 to $3 or $4 million to do it. And the reason is because the way franchising works, the business model is we make money on royalties. But until the franchisee gets launched and up and running and has multiple trucks on the road and has opened other locations, like the royalties aren't meaningful enough to
Yeah.
support the actual growth the actual supports that's necessary on the front end of the business. Because where franchisees need the most help and support is in those first 6 to 12 months. Now, don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong, they need help and support through the entire life of their
Yeah.
franchise. And my goal is to continue to add value throughout that. But if you don't have the infrastructure to support the growth, which costs money, and you don't have franchise fees to invest in that, it's going to be hard to get to where every franchisor wants to get to, which is royalty self-sufficiency. That is when the royalties are paying for that. Just to be super clear, royalty self-sufficiency is when royalties are paying for the infrastructure to run the business, and everything else at the top
Yeah.
is.
They need the most support when they cost the most to you and are providing the least. It sounds harsh, but they're growing their business and their
Correct.
royalties amount to 50 to $100 a month, and you're investing 10x that into them.
Correct. And that's the way it needs to be done. And I think that if more franchisors knew that before they went in to being a franchisor, they might decide not to franchise, which honestly wouldn't be a bad thing. If we had less franchisors out there, I think the franchise industry in general would have a better reputation. because I don't necessarily know that it means that there's a lot of it's just a lack of education. They think they have a good hot chicken business and it needs to be a franchise. And they don't know anything about how to franchise a business. So it's like they're taking a risk on a startup, but there's all these other franchisees that are also taking a risk on them figuring out how to be a
Yeah.
franchisor.
It's crazy that there's so many bad franchisors out there when it costs so much to become a franchisor.
Yeah. And if you don't know what you're doing, it costs even more. And so if you don't have that capital, which is what mostly the case is, that's why they can't be a good franchisor, because they didn't know going into it that they needed $1 million or $2 million.
Let's just keep it a million to keep the numbers easy. Let's say four, like what four buckets would you put that $1 million in? What does that money
There's
go
going to be
towards?
like legal and startup. So getting all of the franchise documents together, the operations manual, that could be on the low end 50, on the high end 150. And during that time and I'm just talking about cash outlay. I'm not talking about the cost of time, right? So that's a
Mhm.
different dollar amount, because these people who have a good business are now no longer spending time on their business that's giving them a return on their investment, because they're allocating their time elsewhere. So I want to be clear, I'm not talking about the cost of time. I'm just talking about cash outlay. You need another probably 200 to get to stand up a franchise sales, either a department or hire a company to do it. You're going to need an operations team member to start. I would not recommend bringing anyone in for less than 100 grand a year. And ideally, if you don't have any experience in franchising, it's higher than that, like 150 plus, because you need someone who can operationalize a franchisor and get
Mhm.
units open and get them profitable. Like, it's a different type of operations person than just someone who's like a general manager at a store. And then you've got to assume that it's going to take you, let's just say, 6 months minimum to get a franchise sold and open. So you need to be able to support that whole infrastructure of the business for those 6 months at least.
Mhm.
And then you need to know, how many people do I need to get that one unit open and then, or get from open to profitable? And what does that infrastructure cost? So all of that's going to come out of that million. And the more units that you sell, the more people you need to support and open the units, which is going to probably supersede that million.
If you sell a ton of units right off the bat, then great, but you're not going to see any fruits from that for a year or two.
And you have to have the support necessary for them to actually speak positively about their experience.
Yeah, because
I
they're
mean,
going to talk
I've
to
been
the other
involved.
owners.
Yeah, if they're not right, like if people are, that's the first thing people want to do is let them talk to franchisees. And it's, if they're not getting the support they need or whatever, like you struggle. I've been directly or indirectly involved now with 14 different residential and commercial service brands, and not one of them has had 28 dedicated employees to the brand,
Hmm.
like fully dedicated, like
Yeah.
100% of their time. And we have 36 operating franchisees right now. We have 51 total. They'll all be open by July. So we have 36 operating franchisees and 28 humans to support them at our home office. It's just the way we're building this is different than anything else I've ever seen before. And that was a big reason for me for doing it, because I'd like to help reset standards in the franchise industry of, no, this is actually what it takes. Costs a lot of money. You probably shouldn't do it. And if you do it, this is the struggles you'll have. And that's why I write about it all the time. I create content about it all the time, because I want to impact that in a bigger way.
Here's one question. So I feel like a lot of franchises, especially the ones that grow really fast, can become victims of their own success and the territories start cannibalizing each other. How do you prevent that? And what is like, how many territories can the US support for Rolling Suds?
So realistically, about 900. So we do 250,000 people roughly per territory, which is larger than the colleagues that I have in the space in home services, which are typically around 200, or they'll do it by like households. And it's just like a predominantly residential business that might give 60,000 households to one person. The challenge that you get into in that situation is if you give someone one territory and then you sell all the other units around them, they can't grow. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was very intentional about choosing the size of my territories and then allowing people to buy multiple territories to start so that they could develop those territories and add trucks within those locations. So I look at it from a perspective of trucks versus territories, because a really aggressive operator could have as many trucks as they want within a 250,000 population area. And our model is not just residential power washing, it's commercial. In fact, the majority of our business is commercial. So $20,000 parking garages and $40,000 courthouses. That's our space. And the total addressable market when you factor in commercial buildings is massive. It's huge. So if someone comes in and buys 3 territories, which is the max that your average person, let's just call it, could buy, they can still build a big business within that. And then what ends up happening is in a good system, consolidation happens typically faster. And what I mean by consolidation is franchisees end up buying up other franchisees. So you'll have mediocre franchisees that perform and they're happy and maybe they cash flow 200 grand on the business, but they're like, I'll just go. I was making 200 grand salary. I'm going to go work at a job again. This is a lot more work than I thought. And the franchisees next to them who now have multiple trucks within their 3 territories will buy those 3 territories. And so I've prepared for that in how I've built this under the expectation that consolidation will happen in my network faster than others, just due to the nature of how sophisticated our operators are. We're already starting to see that. There's people who haven't opened yet and they're going to training together and they're like, I'll buy your markets for double what you pay them and I'll pay you $250,000 to run the business for me. Like literally.
They're just so eager. Yeah.
They're just like,
they're just so excited.
It's crazy. It's so cool.
And you allow that, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I want to help franchisees build wealth. That's why I'm doing this. And so if it's not right for someone that came in, because there's no way I can bat 1,000. There's absolutely no way. Like not everyone's set out for business, and that's like totally okay. But if that person who decides, I want to go get a job, can get a return on their investment, even if they're just getting out for similar to what they paid in, and now this other person can double their potential output with double the amount of territories all day long, I'll do that. It's great.
What is the persona? Hindsight's 2020. You sign a guy. What is the persona of someone that you sell a territory to that just crushes it? Top 5%, top 1%. What does that person look like?
So one of the biggest surprises for me at the beginning of this was how heavy we became so quickly on the commercial side of the business. So I went into this under the expectation we'd be like 80-20 residential to commercial. And in fairness to me, it was because it took our founding location 27 years to have any real relevance in the commercial side. They've gone in the last 5 years from 32% commercial to 56% commercial, which was last year.
By revenue or by number of jobs?
By revenue.
Okay.
So we've been 60 to 70% commercial in a lot of the markets we've entered right out the gate, month 1. So a big part of the business is B2B. We generate outbound commercial leads, but you got to be able to go out, talk to the customer, develop the relationship, and close the deal.
It's a harder close.
And they're calling because they need the service or they're requesting information. So it's still a warm lead, but there's still cold elements to it too. You got to go sit down with the guy who has an $8 million painting business and say, hey, you don't want to power wash into these buildings that you're clean or that you're painting, give them to me. This is a very relationship oriented business. So someone who's comfortable being out in their community, shaking hands, kissing babies. The person who wants to be behind the scenes is going to really struggle unless they have a business partner or a spouse that can do that role, especially initially, because it's such a big part of the business. The way our model is you just start stacking commercial estimates on top of each other every month. And then 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, they start to drop. And so you do residential, which pays the bills. You add more trucks within those 6 to 18 months. And then when the commercial jobs start to hit, then they're more profitable because you have more trucks. So from like a goals standpoint, these are people who want to build big businesses. If someone comes to me and they're like, I just want 1, maybe 2 territories, 1 truck, going to try this out with my son, see how it goes. He's just not our buyer. or she, and people who align with our core values. Our mission statement is actually, this is a relationship, because I believe that the relationships that we have with our franchisees and that our franchisees have with their customers and employees will really help define us as an organization. And then these are people, I call them goalpost movers. It's a lot of the people, most of our franchisees have come from SMB Twitter. They want to, if they get to this benchmark, then they're like, that's cool. What's the next one? Or what's the next one? Or who can I acquire to get to 20 million? Or how do I get to 100 million? Or what other businesses do I need to buy? Or what other brands, Aaron, are you going to launch? Because those are the types of people that have worked well in our organization.
It's funny because I just tweeted about this an hour ago, finding your white whale. I don't know if you saw that, but I gave a keynote speech on it last month. And I gave a speech to these guys that are looking to acquire like $500,000 HVAC businesses, right? They're searchers.
Yeah.
And I just told them, like, take 20% more risk, feel 20% more uncomfortable, and you can have a 200% outsized outcome. So what you're telling me is, like, someone that's, just see how it goes. Like, they're going to get what they ask for. It's just going to be okay. And someone that wants to just conquer the world, they're going to get what they ask for. It'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It'll be confirmation bias, and they won't for sure accomplish their goals, but they're going to be much more likely to accomplish their goals. So it's funny hearing that, because I completely agree. What are they looking for? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a big piece of business, is attitude and risk tolerance. I try to stress to people who look into franchising, like, it is not a get rich quick scheme. It is not a passive business. Like, it's when you buy a franchise, you are still starting a business from scratch. You have some more tools than if you were to do it on your own. We provide help with marketing and recruiting and training and systems. And we've done this for 34 years on the power washing side. And I've done this for almost a decade on the franchise side. So there is less risk, but there's still risk. Yeah. And any franchisor that tells you there's not, or you can just like phone it in kind of thing and collect some money, that's not how it is. Like, it's just the same as any other business. You're going to learn how it works. Our franchisees are not power washing. That's not our, like we talked about earlier, that's just not our buyer. They're going to hire a general manager in training and a junior technician prior to going to training. But it's still hard. And you need people who are understanding of that and still willing to come in and take a really big swing. And if we all know that it's going to be hard and we're all working together towards marching in the same direction, we can grow a $100, $200, $300 million plus company.
Yeah. So do you see a strong correlation between people in sales, people that are extroverts, people that aren't afraid to get their hands dirty? Even if like they're not going to be the one power washing themselves, those are the people that are usually the most successful.
Yes, people that are extroverts for sure. We do have introverts as well. It's not like sales experience is necessary, because we teach that. And it's not like pharmaceutical sales where you're trying to get someone to switch from one medication to the other. Like, these people have a dirty structure that they either own or manage, and it needs to be cleaned. And so it's not as bad from a sales perspective. So it's what the main thing we're looking for is grit. Are they gonna do whatever it takes and not let anything fail? And how has that looked in the past based upon the experiences that they've had thus far? And how do we judge what the future might look like based upon that? And we've been super selective.
Yeah. Do you see a correlation between former business owners versus lifelong W-2 owners and how successful they are?
It's funny, because you would think that it would need to be business owners and that would be the higher success rate. True entrepreneurs, people who are like me, like, we're just going to start, or maybe like you, like, we're just going to start something from scratch and it's going to turn into this big thing. They might struggle more in a franchise system.
A lot of pushback.
Just think about it. They've been rewarded for completely operating outside the box. Yeah. And they have X number of dollars in the bank or X number of net worth because of their ability to do that.
Yeah.
And while we have operators like that, we try to remind them, listen, this is why you brought us in. This is why you
trust
brought
us.
in.
Trust
We're
us.
trying to skip all of those things, and it's not even perfect, but let's focus on the thing that's going to provide the most leverage on the business instead.
Yeah.
And let us worry everything about this. It just varies on the type of buyer and how they operate. So someone who's really good at, here's the manual, follow the manual, and like figures out the manual or whatever it is, or if they've been at a job and they've just excelled and continue to rise the ranks, that person will do really well in a franchise system because it's just like, give me the playbook, I'll just go do it. And so that, yeah, so that it varies though. Like I said, we've got other people who have exited businesses before. We've got people like it's all over the board.
Yeah, I have friends with a Crumble franchisee, and he went to their training, and someone made a comment like, "Yeah, we should try," and they were just like, "We don't want you to be creative.
Yeah.
Don't be creative, please. You're going to be a robot, and you will have the most success. Just trust the process."
And that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, that would be really hard for me, honestly.
It would be hard for me too. It would
Yeah.
it would be hard for me. But I'm like a true entrepreneur. I like to create things from scratch,
Right.
to conjure things up. When you buy a franchise, you're buying proven processes and systems, and they're not always going to be perfect, but it's going to be better. Like when you buy a business or like, that's why searchers work really well that's why a lot of our franchisees have been searchers, because they're like, okay, there's this business, it works, which is
Mhm.
why I'm buying it, which is why I'm taking on this loan. And all I have to do is just run the play and maybe add some value.
Yep.
And a lot of those people will say, God, I've been looking for a business for 18 months and I haven't found that perfect
Yeah.
HVAC business yet. Why don't I consider franchising where I can pay less, come in, get a similar return or get a similar outcome for less capital and potentially less risk?
Yeah, even though that's becoming more popular, I still feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. It's just
Yeah.
they're so set in their ways of buying something that they overlook franchising completely.
Completely. And we're very much scratching the surface of what the possibilities are of searchers in considering franchise ownership. And I can't stress this enough, though. They have to find the right brand. It just has to be the right thing, because we've talked about a couple experiences where it clearly wasn't. And that's sucked for franchisees in those situations.
Yeah.
But if you think about the people who bought into like Orange Theory Fitness, they probably got 7, 8, 12 studios that are each spitting out $4 to $5 million or $3 to $5 million in revenue. Like they're good,
Yeah.
or like they're good, like they're fine. Or you think of the average McDonald's owner is worth $22 million.
Mm.
Like they wouldn't have achieved those returns theoretically on their time and capital without the right brand.
Yeah.
So it's really important to find the right one.
When you talked in the beginning, you talked about how you disqualify a lot of people more than maybe makes you feel comfortable. How often do you talk to someone like me and you're just like, listen, man, like you've bought into power washing clearly, but I think you're just better off doing this. Like just start this from scratch, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of conflict between us over the next couple of years. Do you ever have that conversation?
I get to that situation because of my background and because I have the capital, not have to worry about getting that franchise fee, which is a big piece of it, by the way. If I didn't have that, it'd be a different
It'd be
mindset. I got
tempting.
to make payroll, which is another reason why franchisors struggle. But I have no problem saying this isn't the right fit. Like not is it only that Rolling Suds isn't the right fit for you. I don't think you should buy a franchise. I think you should go start something on the side, see how it works. And the other thing I'll say is a lot of people come to franchising, a lot of franchisees or prospective franchisees come to franchising and think, I don't really have to work because the franchisor will just do it for me, or they'll hire the people, or they'll generate the leads and I don't have to do anything. And that's
Yeah.
also not something that's true. And but yeah, I've told many people like this isn't the right fit for you. And it's not offensive by any means. It's just you need to go conjure something up on your own.
A lot of the time you're thinking, man, this guy's going to crush it too. Like he's going to crush it. But
Yeah.
it's just not the right fit for us to crush it together. It would long-term do more harm than good.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for either of us. It's not a good return on either of our times to try to make this work. It's just go do it. Like this franchise isn't the right thing. But the people who are looking and searching for a business, I feel have already recognized that they don't have a new idea that they want to like start from scratch or that they came up on. They're looking for something with proven systems in place and they can go buy that. And yes, there's risk associated with a personally guaranteed loan or whatever, but it has cash flow. And the challenge is that there's more searchers right now than businesses for sale. Like I think
Yeah.
it's a considerable difference. I don't have the data to support that, but I'm pretty sure it's a considerable difference based upon my experience in talking to these folks and how long it takes them to find this business. And if they could potentially say, all right, instead of the opportunity cost of spending 18 to 24 months in due diligence and lawyer fees and spending time researching opportunities and not working during that time, if they found the right brand and invested 24 months and all of the capital they would have spent doing all that due diligence on a franchise system, get that up, promote people, look at other businesses at that point. You've got a cash flowing business at that point.
I talk to searchers, they're like, yeah, I've been at it for 18 months. And I'm like, what have you been doing? I could literally, and I'm not exact, I've done this myself. I could scrape a bunch of businesses, give them a call, shoot them a text, and be discussing prices within an hour. Like there are tools out there, like publicly available, literally within an hour. Like, all right, it's 3x EBITDA. Let's go have breakfast tomorrow. Like, what is taking 18 months? I don't understand it.
I think by the time it hits the biz buy sell, like, or whatever platform, like it's too late.
Yeah.
But you've got people with way more resources that are identifying these businesses before they hit the market. And so by the time it hits biz buy sell, it's already being bid on. There's probably already a buyer, and it's a seller's market right now on businesses.
Yeah. I still think there are deals on biz buy sell. Like we found one before. They are harder. They're more picked through, and the brokers don't even answer their phone. But you forget biz buy sell. You just calling cold business owners. Like it's just a numbers game. If you talk to 100, there's going to be 5 ready to sell. And of those 5, there's probably going to be a pretty good price in there.
Yeah. And I've got a guy who does my pest. Just like he comes here every quarter, he does the stuff, and it's just an expense I have. Every single quarter, I can't pay the bill, and it's not on auto draft. I have to call in and tell him my card number over the phone, and we're wasting time trading calls. And that'd be a great place if I didn't have all the other stuff going on, but that'd be a great place to start. Listen, how much are you making annually? And what if I just gave you 3 times that? And then you put like an app or like payment structure in place. Like, so there's creative ways to do it, but most of my franchisees are coming from the Twitter/searcher for a lot of the reasons we're talking about.
Yeah. In your system of all your franchisees, how much is the best one making, like the highest performer?
So we don't have franchisee performance yet in our franchise disclosure document. So I'm limited as to what I can say publicly just by the Federal Trade Commission. Our first franchisees launched in July of last year. So they're just for people who are listening to this, you have to have 12 months of a franchisee's performance.
So 10
to
months.
include them in the franchise disclosure document. And franchises are heavily regulated for a good reason, because someone could just be like, this is how much money you're going to make, and there's no recourse. What I will tell you is we launched multiple franchisees last year, and the majority of them ordered another truck and expanded to another truck within the first 6 to 7 months of operation. One of them did it in 2 months. We've got 2 franchisees that just launched last month. They've already placed their order for their second truck. So the model is working, but in terms of any like realistic data for someone who's interested in becoming a Rolling Suds franchisee, we don't have it yet. And that's a part of the reason why it does take a special type of person to buy into an emerging brand, because you're really buying into like me, my team, our vision for becoming the biggest power washing company in the world, the culture we've built, the goals. The franchisee number 150 is not the same buyer profile as franchisee number 20.
Yeah.
It's just not. Now, 2-3 years from now, we'll have more data in our franchise disclosure document to disclose, but a lot of the main territories will be gone by then.
Yeah. How much gross revenue do you expect to get from a truck per year?
Yeah, so I can give you that number. Our average gross revenue per truck is $422,000 as of last year. We had a jump from the year prior from $373,000 to $422,000 just due to increasing efficiencies on that truck.
And more commercial jobs than expected.
Correct. And our trucks and just our equipment, like a lot of people talk about, they're looking for a business with a moat. When I was analyzing businesses, there were 2 things on my kind of checklist that were impossible to find with other businesses I evaluated. I looked at HVAC and plumbing and solar. Like I did the whole kind of like searcher gambit. And the two things were a difference in product offering. So something that is a better product objectively than the rest of the competitors. And so we power wash 5 stories from the ground with the equipment that we have. And we can do a 3,000 square foot house in 20 to 25 minutes, start to finish, set up, tear down everything. That's a $400 to $500 job. So the economics they're just incredible. And we make that equipment. We build the trucks. You cannot buy that equipment. We have a lock on the manufacturer. And the way we run that equipment is the opposite of what power washers are taught to do. So really, we do have a moat, and that was really interesting to me. The other thing that was really hard to find was little to no competition in the franchise space. So in my experience in the franchise industry, there's typically a bunch of local people that do the thing, do the service. And then there's 5 to 10 other franchise brands that also do the service, but they have a different logo and a different truck wrap and a different name and whatever. And they're all coexisting and capturing market share. When I looked at power washing, there were local guys, but there was no national leader. There was no Serve Pro,
no
Power Washing,
Terminix,
there was no Stanley Steamer, no name. Very similar to 1-800-GOT-JUNK in the like early 2000s. Like there was no junk leader. And they came in with a wrapped vehicle and they showed up on time and they built a $1 billion system-wide sales company and paved the way for college hunks hauling junk and Junk King and junk luggers. So anyways, we're doing to the power washing industry right now what 1-800-GOT-JUNK did the junk business in the 90s. And so we basically have a truck that produces more revenue and more profit than other power washing trucks. And we're the first professionalized service provider in the space. And so those were two things I couldn't find in any of the other businesses I evaluated.
Yeah. And it is nice because there's going to be guys going and buying a $500 machine at Home Depot, but you're not really competing with them, right? There is some barrier to entry by way of that massive truck. What do those trucks cost?
About $150,000.
Wow. Okay. And then if I've got a truck that's doing $400,000 a year, I'm looking at my second truck. How much of that could I expect to be net profit?
So you're operating, once you have multiple trucks, right? Because there's economies of scale at a 30-40% EBITDA margin.
Wow.
And we're basing this off of our most recent franchise disclosure document, which we released in April. And it's based on our founding location. So they have 4 trucks that operate full-time, which full-time in the Northeast is 205 days out of the year, which is where the founding location is based. And they're operating with that scale at between a 30 to 40% EBITDA margin. And the thing that changes those numbers is based upon the amount of commercial work you're doing as a business owner, as a Rolling Suds franchisee. You're talking $150,000 EBITDA per truck once you have 3, 4, or 5 trucks on the road.
Could a territory of 250,000 people support 4 trucks?
That is a wonderful question. It depends on a ton of factors.
How many commercial jobs?
There's a recurring element to what we do that, like, we got a lead for one of our franchisees because we turn on commercial leads a month before going to training. And it's 26 shopping centers and they have to be cleaned every year.
Beautiful.
And that's a 6-figure contract with a 3% renewal annually on a 2-year contract. That's one customer that has 26 shopping centers. That same customer manages other shopping centers.
Yeah.
And if he does a good job there, he'll get the rest of them. And that one customer could theoretically become one truck annually in terms of revenue performance.
Yeah.
So I just don't have enough people operating on my model in enough markets right now to tell you what the average is. But it's not one.
Yeah. When a lead comes in like that to corporate, do you charge the franchisees to take that lead, or you're just taking the royalties and they just?
So the way we do it is we have vendors that we've pre-approved, and then we manage those vendors for franchisees. And so we have 6 different marketing agencies that generate leads for franchisees. 4 of them are inbound residential leads. We have a call center that's based in Utah, and that call center,
of course it is,
answers the calls and books the appointments. And then we have 2 outbound lead generation companies that do outbound outreach to property managers, facilities managers, maintenance companies. and then they generate warm leads. And so we centralize all of that in what's called the Rolling Suds Lead Center, where we track and everything. And then those companies bill us, we bill franchisees, and then they don't have to try to figure out where to spend their ad dollars. And if a vendor isn't doing well, we can fire them, we can hold them accountable. There's economies of scale when we're doing that. And they don't have to sit there and say, okay, I want to spend $800 this month on Google ads instead of $700, or I'm going to spend $1,200. Like, we can just use data to drive decision making. So it's they bill us, we bill them kind of thing.
Okay. So how much is it per territory? 150 per truck. I'm going to ask the zillion questions. You're not going to remember them all. What percentage of your customers are financing versus paying cash? Like, what is like an average ticket size to get 2 territories? And then what are your royalty fees?
For 2 trucks and 2 territories and working capital, a franchisee is going to need about $300,000.
Okay.
You are not buying you are not buying the truck. So we have financing options for the trucks.
Okay.
So basically the down payment on the truck, equipment, wrap, shipping, everything to get the truck to them was about $35,000. And so territories 54.9, and then we do a minimum of 2, which would be 500,000 people. They're going to need some working capital in there, which would be some additional startup expenses. So that gets them to the 300 number. And that's going to basically get them to their second truck within the first 6 months, because they have the down payment for that second truck included in that 300. And then our development schedule is to add that second truck 6 months in. So they order that 4 months in, they have the truck on the road 6 months in, and 2 trucks, if operating at what our average day is per truck, is $80,000 a month. If they're operating 20 days a month at $2,000 per day, which is what our trucks do on average per day based upon our current franchise disclosure document. So the goal is to get franchisees up to as much utilization as possible on those trucks within the first 12 months of operation. Now, we've got franchisees that are like, we're going to have 3 or 4 trucks within the first 12 to 16 months. But that's our path that we're putting franchisees on. Each territory additionally would be 54.9. So because our kind of like maximum for your average operator is about 3 territories, people are usually coming to the table with about 360, and they need to have a net worth of at least 900. I personally don't think someone should invest more than a third of their net worth into a business. I think it just mentally doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you're investing half your net worth or 90% of your net worth in a business. So we're really careful about making sure that the people that we bring in are A, right for us, but also B, have the kind of capital to do this the right way and the risk tolerance associated with that. We have not done any SBA loans. The cost of capital right now is like 11%. And the debt service on an SBA loan for our size business is like $7,000 a month. So it just makes it a little bit challenging to have capital to then grow, because you're really not taking any kind of things out of the business for a while. So we haven't done that. We're not entirely opposed to it, but the person would still have to have the capital to support an SBA loan to pay a year anyways. So it's like a matter of how you want to use capital. And then we've brought in some really high level operators that have purchased 5 or 6 territories. And so it's just an incremental 54.9 per territory from there on.
Then what about your royalties or like a marketing fee? Is there like a percentage marketing fee?
Yep. So there's an 8% royalty. And by the way, the numbers that I gave, the 30 to 40%, that's EBITDA. That's not gross margin. And that's not like before franchise fees.
Yeah.
Those are numbers like after they've paid these numbers that I'm about to tell you. So 8% gross revenue goes towards the royalty. There's a 2% brand fund, which goes towards national advertising. We don't really have a sizable enough bucket there, but once we're doing 100 million or 200 million in system-wide sales, we'll really be able to allocate that capital towards like national ads. And then they are required to spend a minimum of $2,500 per truck per month on local ad spend, which is going to go towards those 6 different marketing vendors that we work with.
Okay.
We try to shoot for 15 to 20-ish% cost per customer acquisition cost after 12 months of performance. And a truck at max capacity, if working 20 days out of the month, is doing $40,000. Now, a lot of our franchisees will work nights; they'll do weekends, so that number could change. But if you extrapolate out 2,500 per truck to 40,000, it's still not going to get us to the amount of money necessary from an ads perspective. So that's just a minimum. So we try to set the expectation that franchisees will spend more than that. And so
Awesome. Like I could probably talk for another hour. I just geek out over this stuff. I've never bought a franchise, but I love the concept of franchising, both as a franchisor and as a franchisee. I think it's a brilliant model. And yeah, I just love geeking out over these numbers with you. So thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter, Aaron Harper, CEO. Send me a DM there. And you could also just go to rollingsudsfranchise.com and learn more information. You could just Google my name and Rolling Suds, and there's a ton of content online. I put out a video per day, at least on Instagram, which is Aaron T. Harper. Aaron T is in Timothy. I will say a lot of the content I put out is not Rolling Suds specific, though. It's just franchise specific. So if you want specific details, you can either message me and I'll connect you with someone from my team, or go to rollingsudsfranchise.com and just submit information there. Say you heard about me here, and that would be great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Yeah.